the unexpected in-work zones with backup queue detection, smart work integration, and performance monitoring. The MC today will be Rick Schumann. He's the head of public sector for INRIX, and we have several great presenters, and Rick will go ahead and introduce them. But before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items I want to talk about. First of all, everyone is muted, and you will be muted throughout the webinar. And if you have any questions, go ahead and click on your questions box within the GoToWebinar and enter your question. We will answer all questions at the end of the presentation. After we've gone through everybody's presentation. There'll be 3. If you have any questions, you can, like I said, go ahead and enter that in the box. The webinar is recorded, and we will send a link to the webinar out within 24 hours of this presentation. It will also be available on our website, and that will be up there within the week. So with no further ado, I will turn this over to Rick Schumann.
Okay, sound check.
I can hear you, Rick.
Great. Okay, I will not take long here. We've got actually 3 presentations, and I'll back clean up. For those of you that get on any kind of email lists, you are well aware that this week is Work Zone Awareness Week. It's a few weeks earlier than it usually is. Usually is in April. I find it interesting that there was snow in Chicago yesterday, so I guess they are going right from winter to construction, the only 2 seasons the North has. But you know, the theme this year is expect the unexpected, and I think what and you know, that's obviously the message is largely geared towards drivers. You know, that there's going to be an increase in work zones, and you know, be on the lookout and drive cautiously. I think the theme for this session would be, if you use the phrase unexpected, detect the unexpected, manage the unexpected, fix the unexpected, reduce the impact of it, and essentially eliminate unexpected is the ultimate vision. And so we've got a tremendous lineup here of various professionals and organizations that are essentially developing purpose-built applications and products largely tailored around the work zone. And so in order here, we'll have Dr. Steve Remius from Purdue provide an overview of the incident detection dashboard that Purdue has created in partnership with Indiana DOT. Next will be Nicola Ivanoff, who is a deputy at the CAT Lab. They have a work zone awareness performance measurement tool, an application that they've created in partnership with the Maryland State Highway Administration that Nicola will provide an overview of. And actually, before that, I'm sorry, the order will be Steve, Todd, Nick, then me. Todd Hartnett, Director of Business Development for ASTI, ASTI Transportation, leader in the Smart Work Zone implementation arena. And Todd will talk about some work that we've collaborated on, and some projects and some exciting new developments related to an ASTI INRIX partnership. And then I will back clean up, as I said, with a little more on a summary of some INRIX products in general and how they fit in the overall work zone planning, management, performance assessment arena. It's a full agenda. Each of us are going to take 15 minutes thereabouts. Try to leave as much time as we can at the end for questions. So if you have questions, go ahead and type them in the question box, and then when we get through, we'll knock them off. And you know, several of us are prepared to be here as long as it takes. So without further ado, let me hand it over to Steve, and Rosanelle, you'll be let's see, you're going to move the slides and give Steve control, correct?
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction, Rick. Let's see if I have control here. While I'm getting control, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Steve Remius. I'm from Purdue University. I work with the Joint Transportation Research Program. I also wanted to thank my coworker, Howell Lee, who helped a lot with this incident detection site. And I'm just going to kind of go through the highlights of this site, why we need it, what's important about it. So without further ado, let's see here. I have control. Next slide. There we go. So today I'm just going to talk through a little bit of Purdue's history using the INRIX probe data, as well as our motivation for switching to real-time data, talk through that incident detection dashboard, and start going through how we're using this right now in Indiana. This has been a work in progress for about the last 6 months, and it's been really fun to work with, and I think it's got kind of a national appeal, and I think it's very scalable. It's one of the very kind of key components of this whole thing. Just to start, how we started working with this INRIX data back in 2011, the NDOT commissioner wanted us to develop a mobility report. He wanted us to give him quantitative performance measures that told us how the interstates operated, and he wanted it to be sustainable. We went through a couple different approaches using GPS probe vehicles as well as Bluetooth tracking devices. But what we ended up coming to was the INRIX data, and we used the INRIX data to create 3 versions of the mobility report, the 2011, 2012, and 2013. All these performance measures that we've developed are scalable at the MPO level, the state level, and the federal level. And what's really cool about this is the next vision of this. Every year we do a printed document, but the next vision is to have some dashboards that we can use in real time, so the people get the information that they want to get, and not just a book of kind of the whole statewide perspective, but each district and each individual can look at the roads and the performance measures that they want to look at. So motivation for what we're trying to do with this incident detection app is we've had multiple fatal crashes because of work zone congestion in northern Indiana on I-65. We had drivers fail to slow down, and they ran right into the back of the queue. Here's an example of a crash that happened in July of last year, and on the lower half here you can see this is travel time based on INRIX data over that corridor. And you can see that there was a 3-hour closure and a 90-minute delay, which added up to significant user costs on that corridor. Going forward, there was another crash that occurred about 2 weeks later in the very same area. This crash resulted in the deaths of 7 individuals and the closure of the interstate for about 8 hours. What we're really trying to do is figure out if these are preventable. We have this real-time INRIX data coming in, and whether or not we can use it to alert drivers and operators of potential queues. So this figure here is a study that's still not published at Purdue, but we're working on it. And what it is it's backup queue statistics. And over the last 3 years, we've had 30 fatal backup queue crashes on interstates in Indiana. 46 fatalities were a result of those crashes, and a majority of those fatalities were resulted in rural areas. 11 of the 30 crashes were associated with work zones, and that number is rising every year. In 2012, there were 5 fatalities. In 2013, there were 11 fatalities. In 2014, there were 14 fatalities. What we really were trying to do is determine how long those queues were present prior to that fatal crash occurring. So you see on the right there are the 2 fatals that I had mentioned earlier. And this graph shows how often or how long that queue was present prior to that fatal crash. And what we're seeing here is that a majority of these the majority of the queues that people were running into, whether it be distracted driving or texting and driving or not paying attention, but these queues were 60 minutes long. A majority of these queues were approximately 60 minutes long, or 60 minutes or greater. And a lot of them involved heavy trucks and construction zones. So I mentioned we were focusing on urban or rural areas in Indiana is where most of those crashes occur. In Indiana, we have a ton of ITS infrastructure in the urban areas, and the problem is in the rural areas, it's not cost effective to provide ITS devices that can give us the data we need to warn drivers of upcoming queues. And this is where we want to try to leverage INRIX data in order to prevent these backup queue crashes. So I'm just going to go through a quick example here. This crash happened in February 2nd of this year, and it was in the morning, and it was driver 1 stated that he was watching the roadway for snow and icy patches, and driver 1 stated he then looked up to see the traffic stopped on the roadway in front of him. And you see that picture in the lower left there. Luckily, the guy actually made it out without killing himself, but he did have a broken arm, so he walked away from the crash. But on the right there, you see those green dots are where ITS is. This crash occurred kind of in a non-ITS heavy zone. Now, using the INRIX data here, this is a trip trace using the INRIX data. And essentially, the trip trace is a time-space diagram looking at individual vehicles through a corridor. Using this information, we were able to tell an initial queue formed at around 8:30, and that was due to a jackknife semi-truck on the interstate. The queue started growing and growing and growing until that backup queue crash occurred about an hour and a half after that initial queue formed. What we wanted to do was we wanted to create some type of tool that would alert us when these queues were forming, so we could, use the levers that we have to try to prevent those backup queue crashes. The concept we're using for this is delta speed, and what we're really looking at is the difference in speed from an initial segment to the adjacent segment downstream. And I have a little picture example here. If you have the direction of travel, you have your INRIX XD segments, you have segment 1, segment 2, and segment 3. We're getting real-time data every minute as we're traveling from one segment to another. So going from 70 to 68 miles per hour, you're looking at a delta speed of around -2 miles per hour. Nothing to be really concerned about. But what we really want to focus on is where these speeds go from the 68 miles an hour to the 35 miles an hour, and there's a -33 mile an hour delta speed. And this is where we need to focus our attention to prevent these backup queue crashes. Let's see here. There we go. So what we did was we developed the incident detection dashboard through NDOT, partnership with NDOT, Purdue, and JTRP. And what we do is we take the INRIX probe data on the interstates in Indiana, and we process the 5,000 records we're getting or so for that that day, or for every minute, I'm sorry. And we rate those delta speeds over there on the right. So this is showing all the delta speeds in the state where there's an incident happening. Let's go to the next slide here. And this is what you end up getting when one of those delta speeds exceeds the -15 mile an hour threshold. So as you're looking at this dashboard, if you see a bubble pop up on the screen, that means that a delta speed of greater than -15 miles an hour is there, which signifies that there's an incident on the interstate. The severity of these bubbles is represented by the color, and the lifespan or time that this bubble has been present is represented by the size of the bubble. We also have a series of filtering tabs. The filtering tabs can organize this information by route, by work zones. We have a live feed into the CARS database at Indiana, and it's by work zones, so we can filter work zones and just look at individual things. We can do Indiana State Police districts, NDOT districts, and as well as we can change the severity levels of our threshold. Back to this example of that crash I showed you earlier, where this gentleman ran into the back of a truck that had stopped due to a jackknife semi up ahead. If we step through this incident dashboard, here it is a little bit after that crash. You can see that bubble appear. But as you step through here, this is the same dashboard organized a little bit differently. The initial queue forming at 8:34 in the morning at about mile marker 215. We could have warned the driver, or we knew about that queue about an hour and a half before the crash actually happened. So here's where the crash occurred at 10:16, and you can see the yellow to the orange, and this crash formed, and this queue starts growing backwards. At 11:34, that queue reached the maximum distance, and at 12:14, the queue cleared. Just stepping through another example here. This was two construction workers were killed on I-69 northeast of Indianapolis. We have an example here where we have cameras to validate where the queues are, and I'm just going to step through this quickly, but the backup queue originally formed at 5:50 a.m. and you can see it in the lower right there, where the picture of the crash occurring. As the queue continues to build, you can start seeing it reach these different cameras. So this is one of our validation techniques to make sure we were working. And as you can see here at 6:43, the bubbles are growing backwards, and the queue reached the third camera. Moving forward, it locked up the system for a pretty long time. User costs were really high. The queue continued to grow for multiple hours, and I think it reached its maximum, the maximum queue at about 10 miles, and it was about 4 hours after the incident occurred. And you can see it kind of grows backwards. Well, so what are we doing? With this information to try to prevent these things? First, we have deployed this website statewide. It is located in the Indianapolis TMC as well as the TMCs statewide. We're working on putting this information into the district and the sub-district levels. Just showing the example here, this was us working with the TMC down in Indianapolis to kind of validate some of the queue measures with the Indianapolis TMC folks and cameras. Another thing we're working on, this was actually kind of a funny story. We went and we were trying to show state police this incident detection dashboard and see if we could have any interest from the state troopers, and they were kind of half-hearted about it at first, and they didn't know if it was going to work. But we were kind of driving around, and I said, "Hey, there's a queue over there, at mile marker 22," and the gentleman looked at me and said that there's no way, there's never a queue over there. And of course, we drove over to the mile marker, and there was a queue, and he kind of started to believe it. And what we're currently doing in Indiana is trying to deploy this dashboard in every state trooper car, especially the ones working at work zones, so they can drive to the end of the queue, turn their lights on, and alert people that are approaching the backs of queues. We're also trying to work with our DMS signs as well as our ITS to try to alert folks of queues that they're approaching using this dashboard. The last thing I want to talk about today is how we're rolling this up for work zone engineers. And what we're doing is we've come up with this series of performance measures that will show you where queues occur the most often on interstates. And you can see kind of on the left here is the northbound direction of I-65, and on the right is the southbound direction of I-65. And it's just the minutes that the delta speed is greater than 15 miles per hour. Really how long those bubbles are, or how often those bubbles are in certain spots. And you can see down here where the mouse is right now, Seymour Work Zone was a problem area for us this past summer. And just knowing kind of our week by week what was going on in that work zone, where the queues were, how often these delta speeds were occurring, when they were occurring, and trying to help with our kind of congestion mitigation problems down there in the work zone. Lastly, what we're trying to do is come up with dashboards that, like I said, making these available to people and giving them the information they want. And this is a dashboard that allows a user to select what day of week, what route, what mile markers, what time of day, allows them to pick their groupings and show, work zone by work zone, where those delta speeds are. The moral of this story is trying to prevent crashes and trying to warn people of backup queues before it's too late. And right now, we need to focus on this because we are seeing the information live with this dashboard, but we're not really getting the information to the vehicles. And I think that's the next step of this is trying to transition from this dashboard that the TMCs and the NDOTs of the world can use and get it into the vehicles. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation, and I'll try to answer some of the questions that I saw pop up in the corner here in the lower left.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So we'll do the question and answer at the end of everybody's presentation. As we're pivoting to Todd's presentation, a couple quick points. One is, Steve, you may not have used the term XD, INRIX XD data. If you did, just point out This application, for years we published our real-time data, and we still do, using TMC segments, which can be pretty long in the rural areas. They run between interchanges. XD data, the segment length is typically a mile long, and that's what's enabled this application to essentially treat, the entire network in Indiana the same, with detection rates and latency and so forth. The other thing, I think importantly to note, is that the site's live. And Steve and I were talking. I think, Steve, you're going to put the URL in the chat box, and we'll share it out as well in the in the follow-up materials. So this isn't a research project per se. I guess it started as a research project, but it's used heavily, and it's a live system and service in use today. Okay, with that, why don't I turn it over to Todd, and Todd Hartnett, who's the Director of Business Development at ASTI Transportation. And Todd's going to talk about Smart Work Zone implementations and the partnership that ASTI and INRIX have.
Thank you, Rick. I'm just trying to see where I take control of the slides here. Allie, have you passed that to me yet?
Yep, you should have control. Try it now.
I'm not seeing any slide controls.
Can you use your mouse?
It looks like you've got it. I can walk it through your
Okay,
slides.
I got it.
Okay.
Okay, so that was actually a perfect transition into to my piece of today. Interestingly enough, I would say, Steve, the best thing we need to do is start using more smart work zone systems around the country. So perfect handoff for me. So for those not familiar with smart work zone systems, I just lost my control window here. Oh, there we go. You've got a multitude of different terminologies. You've got different languages, wording. Basically, every state throughout the entire U.S. has a different way of saying the same thing. So the purpose of this slide was just to get everybody familiar with the fact that, there's different systems out there that are essentially the same thing. Smart work zone systems, ITS systems, real-time traffic management, stop traffic, real-time work zone, temporary ITS, active, et cetera, the list goes on. What all of these have in common, they're the same thing. It's just portable ITS. So what I'm going to show you today is just a quick overview of what a smart work zone system is. And the reality of it is it's temporary ITS that most states are already using. It's a combination of sensors, message boards, and cameras. So our niche within the market is, looks like there's a little delay changing slides here, is everything we do is, portable and temporary. So everything's trailer mounted. So this is a sample of the portable Q trailer. So this device is the data collection unit that we're supplying on all of our smart work zone systems. We are a national distributor for Wavetronics in a trailer mounted platform. And we are a statewide distributor for Wavetronics in the state of Delaware specifically. So this is our main focal point for data collection. The other device that would be within the smart work zone system is the portable camera trailer. Can be utilized with any type of camera if you've got certain states that are specific or have guidelines or a back end built out to have certain communication protocols for that specific brand of camera. We're 100% flexible, whether or not that's Vicon Axis or if you've got a QPL that states or mandates a specific camera, we could place any particular unit on that as you desire. It's also capable of doing point-to-point video as well as digital cellular, so it's a completely remote, standalone, autonomous unit. We also work and communicate with portable message boards as well as permanent message boards. So if a particular state has a specification for a temporary workzone ITS system, and they also want to integrate or utilize the permanent infrastructure that's already in place, we can plug those message boards into the back end and communicate with those devices as well. Variable speed limit signs is another component in both permanent and portable fashion that a lot of states turn to actually control those speed limits. So whether it's inclement weather that's causing concerns and you want to drop that speed limit within that particular work zone environment, or it's just, queue detection, has been detected and you want to now lower the speed limit to hopefully reduce rear-end collisions as the traveling public enters that work zone environment, can be used and interchangeable in various aspects of the smart work zone system. And then, of course, utilizes standalone units themselves. Every system that ASTI deploys, we put out a project website, and that project website serves as that front end for the contractor, for the traffic safety folks, for Department of Transportation, any engineers, any consulting engineers, the REs that are out in the field. Anybody that wants access to the system has the ability to get user login credentials, and we also have the ability to limit those credentials to that respective user. So if you want somebody to have a view-only access to the website, or one individual needs to control the message boards or just viewing the data or pan-tilt zoom controls of the camera, we have the ability to isolate those particular individuals and those groups to that respective control. So as you see here, we've got the queue doing the queue detection, so that's our real-time data. You've got the message boards that we would trigger with that real-time update of traffic conditions or travel time information. And then, as we've seen historically, the portable camera really serves as video reinforcement of, hey, traffic's being detected or traffic's not being detected. Let me go to my cameras and actually view the current traffic conditions. We also have the ability to splice that video out to a TMC video wall in the event you want to actually have all of the work zone cameras as part of your video wall in addition to the project website. So then as events occur or cues are detected, you now have that immediate feedback without having to go to the website itself. Slight delay on slide changes here. So here's a blown-up version of if you were to click into, went too far. If you were to click into one of the message board icons, each device that's in the field has its own respective icon. Current conditions, this was a live project that was running. I just pulled a couple of screenshots. So as you see, this is a live message of that board. Construction ahead 6 minutes, which is the beginning of the travel time message. So here's the other piece of it, Madison Highway 463. This was the I-55 project in Jackson, Mississippi that has just recently ended. Clicking on the icon for the video gives you a live pop-up of that particular camera. You have pan-tilt zoom controls that actually give you access of that particular camera through the website. Typically, we're doing cellular network on the majority of our portable video. We average right around 4 to 7 frames per second through cellular network on a 3G platform. 4G, oftentimes, depending on the coverage in your area, could get us as close to 30 frames per second, which is almost streaming video, as some of you are, I'm sure, are aware. Current speeds lane by lane. So this is how we actually display the Wavetronics data from the queue detection trailer. Obviously, we have the ability to poll both multi-direction. So if it's a northbound and southbound lane in this particular example, we're pulling lane by lane, multi-direction, and posting all of that minute by minute data into this website. At the same time we're polling these devices and posting this information through the website, we're also disseminating that XML file to the state. So if you're looking to store that data into the state's back end or some form of historical data compiling, that now gives you the ability as a state entity or an engineer or a consulting engineer to utilize that historical data to say, hey, in this scenario, this is what we did, on this type of corridor last year, or the holiday weekend, this is how we handled it when we did a lane closure, and the data then gives you those results of, what work zone environment was provided and what data was provided, how real-time traffic conditions were impacted by that particular event. And we also have the ability to trend and forecast charting and graphing through our website as well. So here's an example of any device that we have that we're polling. We're constantly storing that information within our back end here at ASTI. And you have the ability, this is an example of a Q detection sensor, to poll that specific sensor any time of day, anytime you want, while you're still getting that back end data XML to you specifically. You can go in and just poll this specific sensor. So I gave an example of speed, volume, density, polling, an individual Q trailer. So you have that power at your fingertips as a user, as well as the massive amount of data that comes through on the back end. One of the things that we just started doing recently from a new product perspective, as well as managing inventory, is asset tracking and geofencing. So this is an example of, we've got a project running and we want to manage the inventory, make sure that the devices aren't being removed from the project. So we actually have the ability to create a geofence around that respective device, whether it's a sensor, message board, etc., all through the capability of that asset tracking hardware being added to that device. So, we happen to get a device that goes outside of that fence that we've built, and this is all user-friendly through your login credentials. So you would have the ability to create and remove your geofence as you see fit within that particular project. Anytime anything leaves that particular region or area that you've highlighted, you then get an automated notification or alert mechanism that you've already set in place that alerts you that there is a concern. Take a look, dig in deeper. The asset tracking capability also is able to determine run times. So if you want historical run times as well as historical plotting, you can poll it for that information as well. This is just a sample spreadsheet as I threw in there minute-by-minute historical data. So this is similar to what your file would look like, time and date stamped, literally lane by lane, speed by speed, volume, density, etc. Here we label it as occupancy, but just shows the ability to post that data directly. So the first ASTI INRIX integration. First project we ever utilized INRIX is actually running right now. It was a system located on I-90 in Boston, Mass. The goal of that project was to really determine whether or not INRIX was a fit for us, and I guess in some way whether or not we were a fit for INRIX. So we kind of passed some information back and forth, got a feel for how easy it is to integrate data into a particular project. Something that we find often is we've got our own restrictions within projects that really do not allow us to place devices within the field. And that's probably one of the most important aspects of our interest in the INRIX partnership, which I'll get into here shortly. But the first project is currently running. We've been utilizing it for several months now. And to give you a little bit of background on the system, we've got 11 message boards, full matrix SMC 2000s. There are 10 portable Q trailers with Wavetronic sensors, 6 cameras, access-based cameras. We've got 5 Bluetooth devices. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we always provide a website with software. And now we've added the INRIX data integration. purpose. So proposed benefits, as we ran into scenarios where we had the field restrictions, one of the things that we were speaking with MassDOT on was why we felt it was a good idea to utilize INRIX, and the bullet points that we came up with were, the desired data collection areas were not feasible for that equipment placement, so probe data enabled ASTI to provide an effective solution without putting the hardware out there. So that also allowed us, obviously, to reduce our hardware supply, reduce our mobilization cost and shipping costs, as well as reduce the equipment maintenance. Now you've got less equipment in the field, didn't cost you anything to get it there, didn't cost you anything to supply it or take it out of inventory, and the end result is now we have an enhanced travel time system in place as a result of bringing INRIX into that picture. The benefits, safer work zone environment at and near. So in a scenario where we couldn't get devices, the fact that we still have the ability to pull data from that area, we've now enhanced that work zone environment. So we're able to provide real-time traffic conditions as opposed to being completely blind in those areas. Smoother traffic flow, less drastic queue formation, reduce user costs and better public relations. Now you can provide more information from a travel time perspective to those motorists on that particular corridor. The ability to see data in the area surrounding the work zone, which is something that we've got a strong interest in on a lot of projects moving forward. Instead of just capturing the smart work zone, we now have the ability, without placing equipment on those exterior roadways, to provide travel time information as alternate routes open up or become available, or we can redirect based off of what we're seeing as travel times on those outside roadways. So now your atypical smart work zone system that would get deployed with the equipment that I referenced isn't limited to just that corridor. Now we have a much greater reach, much greater information sharing to the traveling public as well as to the Department of Transportation, who is the end result, our client, the stakeholder. Providing travel time data outside that main corridor, as I just mentioned, additional travel time data reinforcing our findings with the existing hardware. So it does have its own aspect, but then it also reinforces the areas that we're already collecting data. New opportunities. So, Rick, I guess it's been a few months now that we've finalized an ASTI INRIX agreement, and the purpose of that is we have a purpose and a value to INRIX, and as I've mentioned here, they do to us as well. So from our perspective, the new agreement will open up a considerable amount of new opportunities with our existing projects, as well as solidifying those relationships that we already have in place with certain departments of transportation. So we're bringing another piece of the puzzle or another value-added solution to what we would typically offer. Partnership benefits, the big one, more data, data. I thought of numerous ways to say that, but I figured that was the easiest to get across. Enhanced and more accurate coverage kind of goes back to what I mentioned. We're able to get areas that when we had restrictions, we could not receive or see existing traffic. Sharing of the ASTI INRIX sensor and probe data across all of North America, so the reach is pretty great. Reduction in data capturing expenses. So now we're able to deploy less hardware, and the amount of data and detailed data that we'll be providing to INRIX, I'm hoping and assuming that that will help them on their costs as well. Hybrid data collection of both probe and sensor based, which is huge. Enhancing the specifications and overall the offering to our joint clients. We're putting out a better product, better solution as a make sense fit. The goal, as I just mentioned, providing a better overall product. Market penetration of the hybrid work zone. Providing a safer work zone environment to the workers and traveling public is a given. Empower drivers to make effective decisions as well as more convenient travel methods. Having that information on those exterior roadways as well as that smart work zone corridor. And in the end, saves lives. You know, by providing real-time information to the traveling public, you're getting the real-time traffic conditions from that sensor, as well as, you know, massaging in that INRIX data into our solution. So the great Denise Markel, if you have never spoken with her, I would highly recommend it. Has a tremendous amount of experience, New Hampshire Department of Transportation, with smart work zone systems as well as INRIX data collection. And she was kind enough not too long ago to put a slide together here. How much does a collision like this cost? I love putting this into my smart work zone slides, because you look at this, if you've got an accident or a collision, or in this scenario, a flipped over truck, what are the costs associated with that? So as you see, you've got fire department, damage to vehicles, you know, potential airlift, towing, ambulance, Department of Transportation. There are many variables associated with one vehicle accident, and this total cost is $155,000. I don't know how many systems ASTI has provided over the years that are much less expensive than $155,000. Now, we've also supplied, you know, multi-million-dollar systems, you know, on high-profile projects that we require, you know, greater amounts of equipment, integration, and other components. But the reality of it is, if you prevent one accident by utilizing a smart work zone system, it's paid for itself. You know, from my perspective, obviously it's a no-brainer, but you know, I'm sure there's justification of cost within Department of Transportation. So as I was doing that, I thought I'd throw in some interesting statistics here from a cost perspective. So Stanford economists have demonstrated that the average value of 1 year of quality human life is about $129,000. Average U.S. life expectancy is 79.8 years. So do the math. 129,000 a year times 79. That's a $10 million life value per person. Average vehicles death per year, 32,719 is the stat based on 2013. Do the math. We're at $336 trillion of human life value that we lost in 2013. So what does it cost by not implementing work zone safety is my conclusion. And as we mentioned, I believe we're going to hold questions till the end.
Yeah. Thank you, Todd. So that's a big number to kind of transition from. While we transition to Nicola, a couple of things as I see the questions, and we'll come back to the questions in specific here at the end, but kind of contrasting the first two presentations, the implementation that Steve described leverages entirely INRIX GPS-based probe data. And as Todd mentioned, the core of the ASTI solution are the smart work zones, where you have the need and both the budget and the need to implement some kind of on-the-ground sensors. And then, as you mentioned, we're now collaborating on how, on hybrid approaches that'll kind of get the best bang for the best buck in those situations. So I just want to make that point as we transition here. And with that, Nicola, thanks for hanging in there. I know you might have iffy reception here, so hopefully it'll hold up through the presentation, and you can show folks what great things are doing on the East Coast. Nicola.
All right, great, thank you. Let's see. I believe I have control now. All right, so what I'm going to talk about today is work zone performance monitoring application that we developed at the University of Maryland CAT Laboratory, and I'll give you a little bit of a background as to what how that application came about, and then what it actually looks like. So it started, the motivation for the project was the compliance with the final rule of the Work Zone Safety and Mobility. And in 2013, we have State Highway Administration and Federal Highway Administration funded a project that actually started off as a research project to look at how probe data could be utilized for work zone monitoring, performance monitoring. And so we developed a pilot tool that ended up being deployed using INRIX Pro Vehicle Data and RITIS, which is Regional Integrated Transportation Information System, also developed at the University of Maryland Cat Lab, using that event data and INRIX probe data to provide an application that allows different groups of people to actually monitor a work zone in real time. So in 2014, so this last year, I-95 Corridor Coalition also provided additional funding from MCOM program to try to deploy this version of work zone performance monitoring application to other coalition states, so the states along the I-95 Corridor Coalition, and that's the work that we're currently undertaking. So a couple of key definitions and data sources that we utilize for this, as I mentioned earlier. The active work zone information was provided by the Maryland State Highway Administration Coordinated Highway Action Response Team, also known as CHART. And we also received incident and event data that you will see how that's utilized in the dashboard as well from the CHART system. And then the probe vehicle speed information was coming from INRIX. And what we did is we defined this whole idea of work zone. What you're seeing here is the way we define the work zone is if you have the roadway with the traffic moving in that direction, the work zone is actually the whole area surrounding the work area, and we defined upstream and downstream from the work zone. We also defined queues and bottlenecks that are utilized to determine mobility through the work zone and around the work zone. And the way we define those queues and bottlenecks is that whenever the speed falls below the 60% of reference speed for an amount of time, so in this case 5 minutes, we start tracking that as a potential bottleneck. And then as that time progresses, once the bottleneck is cleared is when the speed goes above that 60% threshold and stays above that threshold for 10 minutes. And the idea here is to avoid identifying a bottleneck that's not a true bottleneck if the speed drops just for a moment, or if the speed rises above the threshold for a moment, but the queue is still there. So the time from when the bottleneck starts to the time that the bottleneck ended is how we define the bottleneck as a whole. And also we use this concept of user delay cost, and I like the slide that was showed just earlier about the cost of delay and the incidents and so on. And so what we've done is we've developed an ability to show how this delay is presented in terms of the cost. And so what we did is we used the average daily traffic, the percentages of passenger and commercial vehicle and their value of time, and then the speed reduction factor and the delay to calculate what is the impact of a particular set of delay. So when we developed this application, the goal was really to hit 3 different types of audiences. The first one was to look at the project engineers and managers. So these are the folks that are responsible for the actual work zones in their operation. And the goal was to provide them with real-time performance, something they can look at in real time and say, okay, this particular work zone is performing the way that we expected or not. And also to provide them with alerts when certain thresholds are exceeded so that they can react to those without having to be glued to a monitor and looking at the application at all times. And then also giving them some additional details about what specifically is going on in that work zone so that they can actually develop some potential actions based on that performance. The second group of audience that we wanted to reach was the public relations folks. So we knew that at State Highway Administration, they will occasionally get phone calls from the public saying, you know, I'm in this traffic jam here that's caused by the work zone. And so being able to verify that claim and find out what's going on, this application was trying to reach those folks as well so that we can provide both the real-time and historical performance information to them to make a decision and a response, and then to respond to those complaints and inquiries. And finally, we looked at the planners and decision makers to really show them what are the costs of closures, how can those be done differently. So if there's a way that the work zone can perform better, if the closures are organized a little bit differently, this application allows to look at that historical data and look at that previous performance and determine how to handle it. On the geographic side, this application allows you to look at regional performance. So if you look at the map, you can see where all the different work zones are occurring, and you can kind of drill down into those and see what the impact is. And then you can also see the corridor performance by looking at the user delay cost associated with a particular corridor over a period of time, as well as individual work zone performance. So going from that regional to corridor to individual work zone was the goal of this application as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what this work zone performance monitoring application actually looks like. So this is something that we've deployed for State Highway Administration, as I mentioned earlier, and this is something that they're utilizing currently. And this is what it looks like when they log in. And what you're seeing is...
Nicola, I'm sorry,
yeah.
This is Rose. I need to butt in a minute. We're having a couple people who are having a hard time hearing you. So can you speak more directly into your mic?
Absolutely, yes. Is this better?
That's much better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So what you'll see in this application is that it's made up of 5 or 4 different panels here, 4 different panes, and I'm going to kind of walk through each one because each one provides a different type of information, and this dashboard as a whole gives you an idea of what's going on out there. So in the dashboard, what you're seeing is all the work zones that are occurring currently. So right here in this left pane is all the current work zones in Maryland that are divided by counties. So you can see that Allegheny County has 3 work zones, 2 in Arundel County, 15 in Baltimore County, and so on. And they're identified by their locations. Here you can see the number of incidents that occurred nearby those work zones. They're totaled for the entire state, also for the county, and then by each work zone. In the next column here, you can see actually the queue length that's associated with that work zone. And what's interesting here is you can see that there are certain work zones that have queue length of 0, which means that they never had a queue built up in or around that work zone. The ones that have a little number line show you the minimum and the maximum queue that's associated with that particular work zone. So you will see that this work zone has minimum queue of 0, obviously, and then the maximum queue of 2 miles. The dot represents the current queue. So what this is doing is actually combining historical information with real-time information to give you an idea of how things are changing. So if it's a dot, it tells you that it's a steady queue, so it's not rising or falling, it's just at 0. But you can see in this particular case, there's a rising queue. So this queue is, I can't see that, but I believe it's 0.2 miles or so, and it's growing, and that actually gives you an idea of how this particular work zone is performing. And finally, you can look at the user delay cost associated with that particular work zone, and then also the sum of that user delay cost per county and per state. So this pane gives you an idea of what's going on statewide. On the right side, there's another pane that shows top critical work zones, work zone locations, and user delay cost. Now, the way that the top critical work zones works is that it allows you to filter out the large list that you have on the left to things that are performing worse than they should be. So, for example, you can set up a severity so that the major work zones have certain queue lengths before they start showing up in this list, and critical work zones are those that have even worse queue than that. And what you can see is you get some additional information here where you get the lane information, lane closures, so you can see which lanes are closed for each one of these work zones in real time. And you can also see a little graph of the queue and how that queue has been changing, as well as their user delay cost. And so what you can do is you can actually go in and you can change that top critical range and customize it to your own liking. So for example, I've identified here that all work zones above 0 miles of queue, so any work zone here will be major, and then anything above 5 miles will become a critical work zone. And what that does is it basically takes work zones out of this list and shows them in here as well if they match the criteria. Down on the right side in the pane, you can see the user delay caused by corridor and day of week. And so what we're doing is we're showing you the last 7 days of these work zones along each one of these corridors. And so I've selected here 4 different corridors along the top. And then what you're seeing is from Wednesday to Wednesday, each cell represents user delay cost that was occurring on that corridor. And Saturdays and Sundays are marked as well. And so what you can see is that on I-95, we had a pretty high user delay cost associated with that corridor for that week, not so much on US 50 and on I-70. And then you can see the grand totals for the corridor, either by week or for the entire month. Finally, you have the ability to change that, so you can look at the total user delay cost as what I was showing you, as well as cost per user, total delay, and delay per user. And you can also select different corridors, and so we have a list of common corridors used in Maryland that the users can select and customize this this pane. Finally, in the this work zone dashboard, you can actually modify some of the map layers here, so you can resize all these panes if you want the map to be larger and the list of work zones to be smaller. You can resize it; it's all dynamic. But you can also turn layers on and off. So, for example, you can see where all the work zones are. You can turn on dynamic message signs, and you're able to click on these and see what the lane closures are, as well as what's posted on the dynamic message signs. And then you can also use different types of probe speed data layers. So you can look at the raw speed versus comparative speed, which compares, basically takes away all the recurring congestion and shows you the non-recurring congestion. So these panes all together give you a general idea of what's going on statewide or in a county, and you're able to customize it to your specific liking. The next thing you can do is you can actually click on any one of these work zones, whether they're in the top critical list or if they're in the general list of work zones. When you click on it, it will actually open an individual work zone profile. At this point, you're digging into specific work zone and statistics associated with that work zone. And again, this is organized in a similar manner with several different panes that you can resize. And so over on the left side, you can see some settings that allow you to modify how this particular screen looks like and what's posted on it. You can also see the zoomed-in map of where that work zone is located. You can zoom in and out of that map to see what the surrounding area looks like. In the middle, you can actually see the current conditions. So what this is showing you is the roadway, and as you will notice is that the speeds are posted based on INRIX probe vehicle data and the TNC codes, and they're showing you colors for each of the measured speed values on the TNCs. You can also see the posted speed limits if they're available, as well as cameras. So if there's a camera in the nearby location, you can hover over it and it will actually show you that camera image. You can't see it here as well, but right below this camera image, there's a boundary that shows where this work zone is actually occurring. And what you can do is you can modify how many miles up and downstream from the work zone you're looking at so that you can see what the extent of the impact of the work zone is. So as I said, these are the actual recorded values on the roadway. Over on the right side, you can see different types of graphs. And what you're seeing here, again, is a combination of real-time data with historical data. So what you're seeing here is the real-time travel time through the work zone, and it's showing you how that's been changing over the last few hours. But below that, it's also showing you 7 mini graphs that allow you to see what the last week looked like in terms of the travel time through the work zone. So in the application, as you hover over this line, there will be a little dot that hovers over the same location in the mini graphs. And so the idea is that you can compare, for example, this Thursday they had a large spike in travel time to what the day looks like today, and see if there's something out of ordinary going on in this particular work zone. And finally, you can look at the work zone user delay cost, which is associated just with this work zone, and it's organized similar to what you were seeing on the previous screen, where it's organized by day and then a set of hours at this location. So for a time period between midnight and 4 a.m., you can see how much user delay was associated with this particular location. You will notice here that between 8 a.m. and noon on this Thursday, so right where we see that spike in travel time, there's about $12,600 of user delay cost. So that corresponds to the delay that was introduced in that particular location. So then you can modify a couple of things using the settings that I showed you over on the left side. So one of the things that you can do is you can compare measure speed to historical average. And what that will do is actually recolor this particular profile of the road to show you the change in speed rather than the raw speed. So you will notice here that there's a negative 14 miles per hour. It's red. So there's a drop of 14 miles per hour leading up to that work zone. And these are the work zone bounds that I mentioned to you earlier, which are shown in a way that allows you to see where the boundaries of the work zone are, both in up and down the stream, but also the lanes that are affected by this particular work zone. So you'll see that it's a shoulder and a lane that are affected by this work zone. And then you can also change things up here. Instead of just looking at travel time through the work zone, you can actually change it to, for example, raw speed through the work zone, or you can change it to look at things like upstream from the work zone, downstream from the work zone. If there's a queue that builds up, it's actually going to show up in the little margin here, and it'll show you where that queue is. And you can also see if there are any associated events in the area. So, for example, in this case, there's a road work that's occurring on the other side of the road that started at 7:11 in the morning on April 17th here. So you can see if there's an incident, for example, somewhere along the roadway, you will be able to understand how that impacts your work zone and how the work zone actually impacts that incident. One of the things that the users really wanted out of this work zone application is this is great if you're able to sit in front of a computer and just kind of look at it all the time or monitor stuff from your desk, but it's kind of difficult to do that if you have other things that you have to do or you're not by the computer at all times. So what we did is we built an ability to alert you of any changes to your work zone based on what your preferences are. And so what we did is we built this little interface where you can fill out a little form that allows you to select different things. So for example, you can be alerted if there's an accident that's happening near this work zone, if there's a bottleneck that includes this work zone or is starting in this work zone, and then if speed in the work zone fall below a certain threshold or if they exceed certain threshold. And you can also get an email or a text message, so you can receive that on your phone, and you can select dates and times when you're interested in receiving those work zones. So for example, if the work zone is active only between midnight and 6 a.m., you're probably not going to be interested in looking at, alerts or getting alerts for slowdowns in that location that are not associated with that work zone. So what that looks like is you can click on each one of these, and it allows you to specify and customize this alert. So for example, you can look at accidents that are happening within 1.5 miles upstream from the work zone or 0.5 mile downstream from the work zone. You can also look at the bottlenecks, and I've showed you earlier in the slide deck how the bottlenecks are identified, but you can see when a bottleneck exceeds certain length, you can get an alert, and as well as any speed changes. So if the speed falls below a certain threshold, it will alert you, and then it will alert you again when the speeds rise above certain threshold. And the idea here is that project managers or folks that are responsible for these can subscribe to as many of these work zones as they want and get these delivered to them automatically so that they don't have to necessarily monitor the application. But once they receive them, they can go either look at the application and pull up the video feed, or they can, if they're in the region, they can actually go out to the site. And this is what happened with some of our users that started using it. They were extremely happy by the fact that they could use these alerts to be pointed to specific work zones that they're managing in case of an issue. So some of the next steps that we have as far as this application is concerned is really working with I-95 Corridor Coalition to start expanding this application to other states, and also looking at larger geographic areas. So not necessarily just a single state and work zones in that single state, but really looking beyond jurisdictional boundaries and really integrating multiple states and regions. The other thing that we need to do is we need to start looking at integrating permit data. So currently we have a spot in the application for it where you could actually pull up the permit information associated with each one of the work zones, but it's been a challenge getting that permit data out of the system. So what we're working on right now is integrating that piece as well. And then also looking at improvements of underlying work zone and TNC link data. So sometimes the work zone boundaries are not readily available or not accurate. And so really looking at getting that data to be a lot more accurate to allow us to show it in this application, really show the impact. And also looking at, as Rick mentioned, the XDs and looking at smaller and smaller links to be able to show speeds at a higher granularity so that there's a little more knowledge as to what's going on leading up to the work zone or through the work zone. So with that, I will go ahead and end my presentation.
Okay, thanks, Nicola. While we're making shifts here, I know you may have to run, but there's a couple of questions that possibly while I'm chatting, before you can go, if you actually type in the answers, then when we go back to question and answer, we'll let the whole audience know. But there's a couple at the bottom if you've got access to it. So then we'll review it with the group. So so if you're not with us at the end, at least we've got your answers on the record. So thank you.
Will do.
I will attempt to proceed as quickly as possible here to ensure we have time. Let's see here. If I go to walk me through the trick here, Callie.
Sorry, Rick, I had to take back controls for just one moment. You should have controls now. I think there's just a little delay. Let me know when you get it.
Okay, let's wait just a sec. I don't have a slide yet. I just see the main. There, okay, now. Can I get the magic box here? So while we're working this out, I may need you to control slides because maybe, hold on, let's see if I have.
Okay, try now.
Why don't you just go ahead and control? So as you're seeing, there's these are three specific implementations that leverage INRIX, kind of live INRIX data, XD, segment level data, and produce case. Todd has lots of different tools at his disposal, whether it's showing a traffic map with our traffic tile service, the data itself, dynamic route travel times, and Nicola showed you TMC-based real-time data tools. This image here kind of gives a list of the various products that we've evolved over the years to support public sector. The XD APIs, the XD and TMC, but XD is the new high-res, high-granularity versions. I think a lot of that's been discussed, but I'll show a few things related to that. The monitoring, the ability to use tools that we have with just passwords and applications to monitor essentially anything in America, but in this case, work zones of interest, historical data, and analytics. I will touch on a little bit in both cases, and I think it's also important to point out what Nicola showed you. If you're a member of the I-95 Corridor Coalition and an active member of the Vehicle Pro project, those modules are available to you as part of your participation in that project. If you are outside the coalition of the Vehicle Pro project, that module is available as an option to INRIX Analytics. And again, bringing together INRIX live data, INRIX volume profiles, and your incident work zone data in this case to allow you to do exactly what Nicola was showing in the case of Maryland. Next slide, Ali.
Rick, you should have control now. Do you want to give it a shot? I think I saw your mouse moving.
Did I just press that? Oh, fantastic.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so as you said, again, XD API is covered well in the presentations. I'll show you a little bit about the resolution of XD. I'll talk about some monitoring, and I'll talk about INRIX Analytics quick here. We have a free website, inrixtraffic.us. Many of you may already be subscribers to this. It's designed to be used in the operations centers by operators. It's a free version that folks can just go to INRIXtraffic.us and request an account. Use your agency password, agency email address. So again, it's designed for agencies, not for the general public use. We provide core coverage on that as far as traffic flow and the like. We have a subscription option, a small add-on fee that's called INRIX XD monitoring. It greatly enhances the amounts of roads. It handles in and around interchanges and provides that 1 mile or better, if you check subsegment granularity. It provides high-resolution granularity across the road network. The features, again, if you're a subscriber, an XD monitoring user for INRIXtraffic.us, all those little red arrows are things that become available to you. Again, key things, we cover more roads, more precision. The comparative speed view that Nicola talked about is actually a layer. You click a switch and you can see where things are worse or better than they're expected for that time of day, which is really important to distinguish between recurring and non-recurring congestion. All sorts of incident layers and camera images, in fact, where we have access to them. This image here gives you a sense of the improved coverage of XD monitoring. This is north side of Austin. You can see here, anybody who drives around Texas, there are all sorts of frontage roads, slip ramps, etc. And at the bottom there, you get a sense of what we cover. We're using our XD segments and visually available, and what's the current site of the TMC version and what's above. An example, and this kind of ties to what Steve talked about with the precision queue detection, if you will. This is an image of a TMC segment that we identified as slow on I-75 south of Lexington. You can see here that there's a problem. The segment itself is 13 miles long. So the TMCs on rural interstates, they're governed by the length, the distance between the interchanges. So in this case, there's 13 miles between the interchange. So you have to wait some time in order for a problem to be detected to essentially create and move the needle across a 13-mile segment. In this case, we said it's across that 13-mile segment. It's averaging 7 miles an hour. It's taken nearly 2 hours to get across. So it's a serious problem. If we go to the XD view, and I've kept on the left image, I kept the arrow where the start of the TMC segment was as you're heading southbound on I-75. Again, in the TMC view, we said that's where the problem starts. But in reality, and what we're able to show with XD segments, is the problem starts several miles further down. And in fact, where it starts, it's going 3 miles an hour in the first mile of the queue. So again, perfect illustration of free flow to dead stopped and the queue detection need and utility in a case like that. So again, the monitoring site allows you to see this without essentially you get that granularity as a view. Did I just lose my? Okay. Incident layers, I won't go in great depth here. Just the point being is that there's all sorts of layers on .us. Again, work zones, accidents, etc., that are available in the XD monitoring version. So what we really try to do here is create an integrated view with all the different sources of data that we have, the INRIX flow data, incident construction data that we either get from agencies or we pick up with our own operations center. User-reported alerts. We partner with folks like MapQuest, Weather Channel, our own app, and are getting information related to incidents that may not have been reported yet through traditional channels. About a month ago, we launched something we call INRIX Roadwatch. This is a purpose-built tool that our partner Vision, that works with us on the camera side, has created. And We have a webinar, a recording that you can find on our website related to RoadWatch, but specifically for, again, the work zones. I think the important thing to point out here is as we're working with Todd and ASTI, we essentially, what this enables is essentially an integrated view of various camera images, maybe from your own cameras, from a partner agency's cameras, or even ASTI's cameras, as we integrate them into a single site. So if you're more interested in RoadWatch, you obviously reach out to us. Finally, related to monitoring, we are rolling out a new service. We call it INRIX Incident Reporter. You'll actually notice the tab on INRIXtraffic.us, and this is a freely available thing. This is an area where we think that we can all help each other, and agencies who wish to can essentially adopt this as their essentially incident entry and management tool. There's all sorts of things about it. We'll be having a webinar here in the not-too-distant future about this. We know a lot of you have incident entry and management tools, but they're either challenging to maintain, or you may not have one yet. And this is a cloud-based tool that essentially takes the same thing we use to manage our incidents and make them available to agencies. With proper training, you essentially are able to see the same things we see and work cooperatively with us both to create an integrated incident picture that benefits you as well as the INRIX users. And again, we're making this freely available in the interest of trying to create an integrated incident picture. INRIX Analytics, we have lots of different webinars and material related to this. This is the tools that the University of Maryland created for the I-95 Corridor Coalition that we've worked with them to make available to those outside the coalition. There are all sorts of uses of analytics that can be, that can pertain to work zones. Here's an example where I just went last week and found, I've looked around the country, where's a nice work zone? I should have realized I-35 in Texas. If any of you live there, you know it's been perpetually under construction. This is in and around the Waco area between Dallas and Austin. What I did here on a few keystrokes is use INRIX Analytics, and I took a corridor, I don't know, it's hard to see there, maybe 60, 70 miles long. Took the month of February and just gave an average speed across the corridor for the last 4 Februaries on weekdays. And what you can see here, an example is in the first view was a speed. This is comparative speed. As you start seeing immediately at night here, and it's February 14, overnight construction on the northbound lanes was really slowing traffic on a comparative basis, and you get all sorts of detail associated. Again, so if you're an INRIX Analytics customer, subscriber, work zone analysis, before and afters, real-time assessment, and the like are all possible directly through the tool. Finally, I'll just close here, then we'll hop over to questions, which I think some of my colleagues and the presenters have been answering in writing that we'll go over in verbal here in just a minute. A few other things as kind of ponder the work zone elements and what can be done with this data, and not just performance measures, travel information, incident detection and the like, but taking kind of a broader view that lane closure policies. When do you close? When can you close lanes? When can you take lanes? When can you rent lanes? So on and so forth. The data now really offers a tremendous tool. Steve showed, you can go into last year and assess a long-term work zone in great detail to try to understand what might work, what might not work. And I think that this data will enable organizations to really review policies, things that you have modeled or had a little data collection associated with, and the data collection might be years old. It will allow you really to assess, are the things, the policies you put in place, are they still the right ones? Are they still effective? Were the rules of thumbs you developed they still hold true? And another thought is, I know that there's been some use of this, perhaps not as much as maybe I thought there would have been. I remember, more than a decade ago, folks in Arizona using license plate readers to monitor the travel time through a work zone so like a rural U.S. highway. Essentially, if the travel times took too long, I think it was a flagging operation type thing where they alternated lanes. But if the travel times through that work zone took too long, the contractors are penalized. And again, this kind of data can really support those kinds of performance, incentive and penalty type structures, both setting those targets and measuring performance against those. Let me just close with going back to the incident that Steve mentioned that happened in February. Now, this wasn't a work zone per se, but I think the model holds true. Work zones, inclement weather, or the like. And I just say here, the future is sooner than you might think. If we look at that incident, and as Steve mentioned, there's over an hour and a half, there was some amount of queue that had been built up from an original incident. It's kind of hard to see. I put the arrow, little red arrow. This actual incident was a secondary incident. It occurred as the previous queue had almost dissipated. It was literally within minutes, and this incident would not have happened if you study these traffic traces closely. Imagine a future where that vehicle, and I've grabbed an image here that's on the web from a BMW presentation, and there's a head-up display here right in the middle, and I just added on the right there, stop traffic 4.2 miles ahead at mile marker 214.6. We're not very far from a future where that information is going to be piped right into the vehicles. And in this case, somebody has a head-up display to be able to know, be on the lookout. I would surmise that if this particular person had this information in front of them as they were approaching, this incident would not have occurred. So again, I think there's a lot of hope here for the future. I think the future is very bright. And so with that, I will stop. I know it's a pretty quick movement through this. Again, we have both the XD monitoring site, INRIXtraffic.us, INRIXtraffic.eu in Europe. If you want to trial the XD version of that, you just go and register or send us an email if you're already a user. Say, I want an XD trial, and we'll give you a 30-day trial. We also do analytics trials if you are interested in those as well. So with that, I will close that portion. And I think, Rose, the thing to do here is, I don't know if you want to MC, do you want me to MC, Rose and Allie, the questions here?
Hey, Rick, I'm happy to MC. This is Allie. So one of the first questions we had was during Dr. Steve's presentation, and the question was, where did you get the trajectory data from? And anybody's welcome to chime in.
I'll defer to Rick on that question.
Okay, so the trajectory data is actually, this is an internal INRIX tool at the moment, but essentially what you're seeing there, that's a subset of the GPS probe data that we use to determine travel time, speeds, congestion locations, etc. What we did there is, Steve and the team at Purdue had identified that date, and we have kind of a rolling archive that allows us to recreate that trajectory set along certain roadways. And so what we did there is that's basically digging into what our fusion engine sees and provides out. And so, Steve's detection tool, as Steve showed, basically is showing kind of the summary of what you're seeing there from the vehicle trajectories, where things are slow, where the queue ends, where the queue starts, where the queue ends, etc.
Great, thanks, Rick. The next question, and we've had a couple of these questions throughout the presentation, but question about the slides and their availability, I will answer that, yes, everybody that either registered or attended, even if you could not attend or you have a colleague that could not attend, everybody that registered for the webinar will receive the recording of the webinar within 24 hours. So within 24 hours of this webinar concluding, you will receive an email with that link to the recording. So yes, they will be available. The next question, I'm going to skip over the ones that have been answered in written fashion in the tool, just so that we can get to all of them, but we'll go back to those if we have time. The next question is, what is the relay incident detection dashboard and how does it work?
So the incident detection dashboard, as I showed, based off of the INRIX XD information, what it does is it just looks at that delta speed concept that I talked about, looking from one XD segment to the next XD segment, figuring out the difference in speeds, and really just putting a dot wherever that difference of speeds meets some predefined threshold. In our case, we used the negative 15 mile an hour threshold. And right now it's being used at the TMCs in Indiana, and we're working on kind of improving it, and it's in beta testing right now, and kind of getting it distributed across the state of Indiana and getting feedback. So.
Great, thanks, Steve. Another question is, what is the spatial resolution for urban arterials? Is there a required minimum sample for reliability? And what is the time lag for Q detection?
So in our incident detection dashboard right now, we only look at interstates in the state of Indiana, so we're not really looking at the urban arterials yet. One thing we are starting to move towards is looking at some of the low access facilities. We have a few non-interstate low access or limited access, facilities in the state of Indiana. We're starting to expand to that. The second half of that question was the time lag for the Q detection. We've done some quick studies, and really we think that from the GPS points, or when the thing slows down to when we get the information back, it's somewhere around the 3-minute mark. The way we tested that was we had a car full of INRIX apps in a very, very, very rural section of Indiana at 2 in the morning, and we're trying to figure out how long it took us to show that segment slowing down, and we were getting around 3 minutes.
Thanks again. Next question, what is the lower threshold of AADT that would give reasonable sampling of speed probe data?
This is Rick. So that's kind of a loaded question, because it'll depend. There's a lot of it depends, but again, for a lot of these applications, we're focused on the interstates or the limited access facilities. It's not so much about the AADT. One of the things that differentiates INRIX is we have exclusive access to the largest sources of freight data that allows us to cover facilities 24 hours, 7 days a week, even in situations where there are very low volume situations. Again, the nature of some of these queues is you're not going to get a queue unless you've got some kind of buildup of vehicles of any kind of size, unless you've got a serious blockage. And that tends to distort any AADT. It's become somewhat irrelevant in the middle of the night. You have a very low ADT, but you have an hour-long scenario. Those vehicles start to pile up within that segment. So I don't really want to give I don't really think there's particularly in limited access roads, because of the way we do things, that there is a lower bound. We're judged 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on freeways to get it right, essentially regardless of that lower bound.
Great, thanks, Rick. So I have a couple questions for Todd. What size work zone projects warrant this type of setup? Perhaps some sense of what the Maryland I-90 costs using probe versus what it might have cost with the standard ASTI system?
Yeah, and I simply responded that really the projects that would require is any project that has the potential to have a queue backup. So we've deployed systems as small as 3 sensors, where if you've got a work zone literally just on the smallest bridge, but that bridge is a major impact to that area, anything that creates a queue is a potential accident concern within that work zone. So that would require use or suggest use of a smart work zone system. The Boston I-90 project, the cost on that project as is was right around $200,000, and cost is based on type of equipment, quantity of equipment, mobilization, maintenance, duration. Obviously, a month versus 3 years is considerable cost difference. So there's a lot of factors that come into play into the cost of a system and when and where to utilize them.
Great. And then another question.
Hey, Allie, before I know it's 3 o'clock now. Let me just jump in. I see a comment here from Jawad Parachi from FHWA that's timely, and I just want to make sure that we communicate it to folks before they might disappear. So this is an FHWA comment from Jawad. You may want to mention that smarter work zones are part of FHWA's Everyday Counts 3, and agencies should consider these applications as they try to implement smarter work zone technology applications and strategy. Currently, there are more than 25 state DOTs who have selected this initiative for the 2015-16 two-year period. So again, these are, I said that essentially verbatim from Jawad. I didn't make that up. I don't represent FHWA, but I wanted to make sure that folks saw that. And those of you in the States, I presume, are well aware of what all that means. And obviously, we're happy, as are Steve, Nicola, and Todd, to talk to you more as you think these applications and services are fit.
Great. I've got another one. This might be best for Steve. I'm not sure you guys can decide, but it says, I'm convinced about the monitoring and determining when queues take place, which lead to crashes. What are some of the measures you take once you know these backups are occurring?
So I'll start with what we're doing now, and then I'll move to where we're going. I think Rick hit it. Actually, I'll do it the opposite. Rick hit it best. In vehicle is where we want to go. Getting this information directly in front of the driver is the critical aspect. Right now, we're working with Indiana State Police to get this dashboard in police cars so they can move to the backup queues, especially the police officers who are monitoring work zones. A lot of times they're sitting in a work zone, but they really have no situational awareness of what's happening around them. We think this app will give them the opportunity to say, oh, wow, I'm at this end of the work zone and there's something going on at the other end of the work zone. I need to move. And then the other thing we're doing is we have the Traffic Management Center in Indianapolis who is co-located with dispatch. So if they see something on the monitors while they're monitoring them in the screen, they can call a dispatch and try to get somebody out there to alert. We're also working to try to implement some portable message signs for known work zones and use some of our ITS systems, DMS signs, et cetera, to alert drivers of upcoming queues.
And this is Todd. I wouldn't mind chiming in there. That's kind of the core of the purpose of smart work zone systems, is to do that alerting as far back upstream as you can. So now that driver is not only empowered to make decisions, but also aware of situations that lie ahead. So if there is a queue and stop traffic, whether it's a straight shot heading into it or you're coming around a bend, that information is the sole purpose and design of a smart work zone system, to prevent that rear end collision. So
Great.
The way that's accomplished is through messaging.
Great. And another one for you, Todd. How would the cost or availability of your INRIX enhanced work zone services be impacted if the state had already purchased INRIX data from their state?
Yeah, that was actually a great question. It was something that we batted around between ASTI and INRIX considerably, trying to make sure the best way to handle that. And the reality of it is, moving forward, the nature of our relationship now allows ASTI to supply INRIX data on every smart work zone system moving forward. So that's the value-added service that we are providing our clients, whoever utilizes smart work zone systems. If it's a state that already utilizes INRIX and has, for one reason or another, have ASTI on a project, we would simply massage that data into the system if desired.
Great. One for you, Rick. How would the available queue predictive methods compare with real-time monitoring?
That's a great question. So we are focused at present on real-time monitoring, but it doesn't take somebody a great deal of imagination to think that with our capabilities that predictions of queues, queue ebbing and queue flowing aren't in the future, and I'll just leave it at that.
Great. Let's see. I'm scrolling here. For Steve, for Purdue, Indiana DOT's work zone policy also has queue length thresholds for work zones. Have you considered using an application similar to the Maryland State Highway Association for monitoring work zones meeting mobility criteria?
So definitely. We're kind of in the process right now of fully utilizing, trying to tinker to get as many uses out of our live stream of INRIX XD data that we possibly can. Right now we're working on a series of mobility metrics similar to the ones that have come out of our Indiana mobility reports, and I think I mentioned the goal of the next version of the mobility report will be kind of a user guide to an online dashboard where you see those mobility tools on the dashboard, and you can kind of focus in on where you want to focus in on, and not just have a 20,000 foot up perspective of how the state's doing as a whole.
Great, thank you. Another question, does your monitoring system use loop detector to detect vehicular speed? And if so, how spaced apart are those detectors in Indiana?
So the Inte detection dashboard is completely and totally based off of only INRIX XD data. The loops are some loops are in the NDOT ITS system, but for the dashboard it is only INRIX XD data.
Great, thanks, Steve. And then are the back of queue indicator icons limited to the endpoints of the XD segments, or can they identify the exact locations of the back of queues regardless of where the XD segments begin and end?
Currently, in the current state, they only are monitoring where the change between two XD segments are. Because the fidelity has gotten so much better from TMC to XD, we get, almost within the nearest mile, which is pretty good for what we're trying to do with it. I think I would just say kind of stay tuned for the future. There may be some opportunities to get it a little bit closer, but for prevention of crashes and alerting vehicles of upcoming crashes, mile resolution is pretty darn good.
Yeah, so let me just jump in. So we have a sub-segment reporting potential in our API. And to Steve's point, I think you mentioned, Steve, you're taking around 5,000 segments a minute at present and trying to ascertain the deltas. We can go sub-segment, which would raise that by a factor or something. And in a lot of cases, you potentially could choke on the data. So there really is a balancing act, and there may be situations where architecturally you might take XD data in most of the state. If you've got a work zone for a particular area you're interested in, there may be an opportunity just to, in the existing API call, to extract sub-segment data and perhaps have even more precision available to you. But early views, as Steve mentioned, is if you try to do sub-segment on a statewide basis, you could be choking yourself, and in some ways, maybe taking longer to identify queues just for pure processing purposes and display purposes than you would be gaining across the entire state.
Great, thanks, Rick.
Stay tuned for more, as Steve said. Stay tuned for more.
So we've gone over time. I'm going to address one more question. I encourage you, if you still have any outstanding questions or if we did not get to your question, we will reach out individually following the webinar and address your question. But feel free to continue to submit those through the tool for the next couple minutes while we address one last question. It looks like this question may be for Dr. Steve again. What is the detection and false alarm rate for the Delta Speed incident detection algorithm?
That's a really good question, and right now we kind of consider this incident detection dashboard in beta 2.0. We're starting to get feedback from NDOT users. We don't have the numbers for the exact rate. The only thing I can tell you, kind of the heuristically approach or whatever, is that we every time we've said there's a queue, and we've looked at different cameras and different ITS devices and tried to compare ITS with the incident detection dashboard, it's always looked pretty good. We're working on getting the numbers kind of as we speak.
Great, thank you. Rick, would you like to, any final comments before I wrap up?
No, I'd just like to say thanks to everybody. I know we've been a little over time here. This is, I think, the first time in a webinar we've had, multiple outside kind of partner customers involved, and there's kind of a lot to digest here, and I appreciate everybody hanging with us. Still going strong. Obviously, it signifies the importance of the subject, and I hope you all agree. It's very exciting opportunities to really improve kind of the safety and efficiency of work zones. And we look forward to working with you all to do that. So thank you. And as Rose and Ali said, you'll be getting a link to the webinar. Feel free to pass along and share around to your colleagues. So thank you very much. I'll pass it back to you, Ali and Rose.
Great, yeah, and I would just like to say thanks again to everybody for joining us and sticking with us for over an hour and a half. And thank you again to all of our guest speakers, and to Rick, Steve, Todd, and Nicola. Thank you guys so much for sharing this information, and we'll make it more widely available following the call. Thanks a lot.